Imagine standing somewhere vast and empty. No city, no road, no signal. Just wind, grass, and the sound of something moving through trees you cannot see. You are not alone. But the person beside you is a stranger. You don't share a language. You don't share a history. You don't even share a name for what you're feeling. And somehow, in the middle of all that silence and uncertainty and fear, something begins. That's not a scene from a film. That's how it actually happened. For most of human history, that was the only way it could happen. So here's the question worth sitting with. When two people fall in love today, they have everything working in their favor. Shared language, social rituals, 1,000 ways to say what they feel. And still, love is complicated. Still, people get it wrong. So what happened when humans had none of that? To understand this, we have to let go of something first. We have to let go of the idea that love is a modern invention, that it belongs to candle-lit restaurants and wedding vows and handwritten letters. Because the evidence tells a very different story. Research is studying. Ancient burial sites have found something that doesn't fit a purely survival-based picture of early human life. Bodies buried together. Individuals placed side by side, sometimes with objects near them, sometimes facing each other. We can't read their minds across 100,000 years, but we can ask a simple question. Why would a group of people living in a brutal and uncertain world stop to do that? Why spend time and energy they couldn't afford to mark a loss that clearly meant something? Grief is not a survival behavior. You cannot eat it. You cannot outrun a predator with it. And yet, there it is, written into the oldest human record we have. Which means that whatever these early humans felt for each other, it was real enough to survive death. But let's go back further. Before the grief, before the loss, back to the very beginning of it. How did two people even find each other? In a world without social gatherings, without matchmakers, without the shared spaces that bring strangers together, the options were brutally simple. You lived in a small group, somewhere between 20 and 50 people, most of them related to you. And the world outside that group was not friendly. It was cold, unpredictable, full of animals that could kill you and rival groups that might. So proximity did most of the work. You fell in love, if you fell in love at all, with the person who was already there. That might sound limiting. But here's what's interesting. Modern psychology has a name for what happens when two people repeatedly share the same space under conditions of uncertainty and mutual dependence. Proximity combined with shared threat creates some of the fastest and deepest emotional bonds humans are capable of forming, not because the brain is fooled, but because in genuinely dangerous environments, trusting the person next to you is not a luxury. It is how you survive. 100,000 years ago, love didn't start with attraction across a crowded room. It started with something quieter, with watching someone handle fear, with noticing how they treated the weakest person in the group, with realizing slowly that you felt safer when they were near. But attraction still had to happen, and here's where it gets fascinating. Without words, early humans were reading each other constantly. Every gesture carried information. Every expression was a signal. Researchers who study nonverbal communication estimate that even modern humans convey the majority of emotional meaning without a single word. For early humans, that wasn't a skill. It was the only language available. Think about what that means for love. Today, we can hide what we feel. We can say one thing and mean another. We can perform confidence we don't have, or bury attraction behind politeness and distance. Early humans couldn't do that nearly as effectively. The body gives things away. The way someone's breathing changes when you're near them, the direction their feet point when they're standing in a group, where their eyes go when they think no one is watching. In a world without words, you couldn't lie about love as easily, and you couldn't miss it as easily either. So attraction found a way. But what happened next? Because finding someone and choosing someone are two very different things. And in the ancient world, that choice carried weight we can barely imagine today. A partner wasn't just a companion. They were part of your survival structure. In small nomadic groups, pairing with someone changed your position in the group. Your access to resources, your protection. Choosing wrong wasn't just emotionally painful. It had real consequences for whether you and your children lived or died. Evidence suggests that early human pair bonding was likely shaped by this pressure. The attachment that formed between long-term partners appears to have engaged some of the deepest reward systems in the human brain. Researchers studying the neuroscience of long-term attachment have found that enduring bonds activate brain regions associated with motivation, habit, and deep familiarity, rather than just the early rush of attraction. In other words, the brain is built to move love from excitement into something steadier, something that functions even when life is hard, something that holds. That shift didn't happen by accident. It was built by hundreds of thousands of years of human experience, in exactly the kind of world where a bond that could survive difficulty was worth more than one that couldn't. But there's something else. Something that changes the picture entirely. We tend to think of ancient human life as relentless hardship, and in many ways it was. But researchers who study hunter-gatherer societies, including those that still exist today, have consistently found something unexpected. These groups are not emotionally cold. They are not purely transactional. There is humor and tenderness, and the kind of affection between partners that expresses itself in small, unremarkable moments that don't serve any survival function at all. A hand rested on someone's back. A look held a moment longer than necessary. Laughter shared over nothing important. These things exist in every human society ever studied, across every continent, every culture, every era. Which means they almost certainly existed 100,000 years ago too. Not because life was easy enough to allow for softness, but because humans needed that softness to keep going. Love, it turns out, was never a luxury built on top of survival. It was woven into survival from the very beginning. So what would it actually feel like to find love in that world? It probably wouldn't have felt like a single moment. There likely wasn't a conversation where everything changed, or a night when someone finally said what they felt. It would have been slower than that, built from accumulated proximity and shared fear and small acts of care that no one would have had words to describe. You would have noticed that someone always seemed to appear when the situation was difficult, that they moved differently around you than around others, that something in you settled when they were close and tightened when they were not. And one day, without deciding to, without naming it, you would have simply known. Not the way we know things we've been told, the way we know things we've lived. We started with a question. What if you had to find love 100,000 years ago? But here's what this journey actually reveals. The question contains a quiet assumption that finding love back then would be different, harder, less real, a primitive version of something we've since perfected. The evidence doesn't support that. The grief in those burial sites is not primitive grief. The attachment built through shared fear and daily proximity is not a lesser form of bonding. The love that had to survive, not just heartbreak, but hunger and danger and loss, is arguably something deeper than most of us will ever be asked to feel. The tools have changed. The setting has changed. But the thing itself, the pull toward another person, the way the body knows before the mind does, the need to have someone near when the world feels unsafe, that hasn't changed at all. It was there 100,000 years ago, in the dark, around a fire, between two people with no word for what they were feeling. And it's still there now. If you want to keep exploring the hidden psychology behind what makes us human, you're already in the right place. This is the before language.